Hey everybody, my name is Nathan, and I'm going to share with you guys an experience that has played a rather dramatic role in my life, ending myself up in detox. So I guess it all really began quite some time ago. I think it was about 6 years ago. I spent a good 2 years using heroin. At the time, I had lost everything that meant something to me. And at one point, I had nowhere to live. And I remember waking up every morning just feeling absolutely humiliated. I was couch surfing from house to house. And I remember waking up, and it seemed like no matter how tight I would close the blinds, I would still wake up with the sun beaming right in my face. And when you're in full-blown withdrawals and you have the sun waking you up at 6 a.m. and you're covered in sweat, that is kind of like the last thing you want to experience. I wouldn't wish the things that I experienced on my worst enemies. Now, there came a point where I had exhausted all my resources. I had no more couches to stay on, and I was at my all-time low, or rock bottom as some people refer to it. I remember finally getting a call from one of my good friends, someone who I'd been out of touch with for quite some time. And something told me, just answer the phone. I feel like I was dodging him just because I didn't want him to see me at my lowest low. But eventually I answered that phone call. He says, "Nate, what's going on, man?" And I said, "Yo, I've been using heroin, man. I'm all screwed up. I have nowhere to live, and I just want to get my life back together." And he says, "Well, Nate, you were there for me when I needed it, so I want to offer you a place to stay. If you have nowhere to go, swing by my house later, and we'll get you set up until you can figure out what's next." So I did. I got my stuff, whatever little things I had left, threw them in my duffel bag, and I headed over to his house. Well, even though I moved in with somebody who was offering me a place to stay to where I could get cleaned up, I still continued to use. I was using about a gram a day, and there came this one point. I had done my last shot, and I looked myself in the mirror, and I said, "What the hell have you done to yourself, Nathan?" I guess it's that look that you kind of give yourself a self-evaluation, and I was pretty upset with what I'd become. I became the person I never wanted to become. And in that moment, I set down the needle and I said, enough is enough. First thing I did is I got in touch with the detox center and I said, what would it take for me to get into detox? They asked me questions like, how often are you using? How much are you using? What are you using? And how are you going about getting it? I remember after making that phone call, I called my mom and I said, I made the call and I'm ready to change my life. The last time her and I had talked, she said, "Nathan, we can't watch you destroy yourself anymore. Once you decide to change, let us know and we will support you 100%. But until that time comes, you're cut off." So when I called her and let her know that I was going to check myself into detox, my mom was more than happy to give me a ride to the detox center. She just wanted to make sure that I would go. So ultimately, next step was her picking me up and me heading out. I called my roommate and I let him know, "Hey man, I'm going to be gone for a week. I'm checking myself into detox." I remember my mom picking me up and she wanted to take me to get one last meal before I went through the program. I got some food from McDonald's and I basically spent the next day throwing it up. I remember checking into detox. Once I got myself fully situated, I gave my mom a hug goodbye and she left and I went in and introduced myself to the people that were also in the detox program with me. So we sat outside, we smoked cigarettes, we got to know one another, and I remember this gentleman walks up to me and he says, "Hey, so what are you in here for?" And I said, "Well, my drug was heroin." And he says, "Oh, yeah, me too, man. But I'm here because the police are forcing me to be here." Come to find out, that guy was my roommate. Funny how that kind of lines up that way. So with him and I being roommates, I remember at one point we were both smoking a cigarette, and he walks up to me and he says, "Tonight, I'm going to be sneaking out of here and I'm going to score some morphine. Would you like some?" And part of me was like, oh, thank God. Because at this point, I was in full-blown withdrawal. And so I felt like this was my saving grace. But then I took a look and I thought to myself, what the heck am I thinking? I'm here so that I can beat this addiction, not add to it. So I told him, "Hey man, if you want to sneak out, that's your business. I'm not going to say anything. but I don't think that's the best choice for me. So nighttime comes, and I remember in the middle of the night him waking me up and saying, "Hey, I'm about to leave." Now, there was no way I was sleeping. I was shaking, sweating. I was a disaster. And so when he was about to leave, I said, "Hey, if you're going to grab, let me know when you come back. I'll let you back in." So he says, "Please don't shut the window." Now, to set the setting for you, I'm in Oregon. This is the beginning of spring, so it was probably maybe mid 30s, low 40s in the middle of the night. So it was freezing nonetheless. And I remember sitting there all night and I was shivering. I was freaking out and I was just waiting for this guy to come back. He said it was going to be a few hours. And I remember waiting there and I felt like I was losing my mind. And I had Khal Drogo from the Game of Thrones replaying that scene over and over in my head where he pours that molten gold over the Khaleesi's brother's head and he says, "You want your crown? You can have it." That is enough in itself to make somebody lose their mind. I could say probably about 15 to 20 times at least that scene replayed in my head. So I remember baby stepping my way out to the nurse's station in the middle of the night and I was saying, "I need something to help me sleep." So the nurse gave me a trazodone. I didn't think twice. I took the whole pill and I went back in my room and I laid down, and within probably 5-10 minutes I was knocked out. The next morning I get woken up by the nurse shaking me and I felt like I was in a complete daze. And she says, "Where's your roommate?" And I turn over and look and I said, "Well, isn't he in his bed?" And she says, "No." And she walks over and she uncovers his blankets and his pillows were stuffed in his sheets to make it look like he was still there. She opens up the blinds and sees that the window's still open. So she says, "Oh, we've got a runner." She said, "Did you know anything about this?" I said, "No, I passed out after you gave me the trazodone." So they handled whatever they need to do with that. And I remember stepping out the next morning. They offered us breakfast. I tried to take a couple bites of it, but my stomach was in complete knots. I remember spending the whole next day throwing up and sweating and smoking cigarettes. I guess one of the cool things about the detox experience was the fact that you're not in there alone. You have other people who are suffering with you, and everybody knows misery loves company. So we all kind of got to gather around and complain to each other about how crappy we feel and just sit there and smoke cigarettes all day and watch TV and talk and snack if we could even manage to keep anything down. I remember seeing the guy who was addicted to meth and all he was doing was sleeping, and I felt so envious of that he could even close his eyes, because me, if I closed my eyes, I was either losing my mind or I was shaking and sweating and feeling like I was going to throw up. But throughout the day, I got to know each person, and it was kind of cool because each person kind of offered their own bit to my experience. I learned to appreciate each one of them. There was one guy that was there that was a recovering alcoholic, and he said he was there for the 3 hots and a cot. Basically, 3 hot meals and a place to sleep until he was ready to go back out and do it all over again. Now, that wasn't why I was there, of course. I was there to make some serious change, but nonetheless, I did appreciate his company because he was a conspiracy theorist, and he had this little notepad that he kept all of his ideas in. He was going to write a book one day, and it was pretty cool because I remember sitting there and a lot of his ideas I would line right up with. So when we'd conversate, it was one way for both of us to keep our mind off things. So one thing I really appreciated about the detox experience was every night, and I think it was around like 7 p.m., we'd sit down and we would talk about how everybody was feeling, and the counselor that was there would kind of try to give us all a little bit of hope. And the cool thing about that counselor in particular was he had gone through that exact detox program, years prior, and so he could say, "Listen, I've been where you are. I'm not just somebody who studied this in school and I'm trying to offer my service to you. I've been there and I'm a living testimony that things will get better. You just have to see this through and want the change." I remember that resonating really well with me and thinking, wow, if this guy says that he was as bad as I am, I'm going to believe it, and I'm just going to try my best to make this happen. I want to be back on track. I want to be successful, and I want to live a prosperous life. I want to be happy again. I'm tired of being sick and tired. Now, I remember being in a dormitory style sleeping situation, and it was like a symphony of snoring in my room. We had 3 beds in one room, and it was like a constant snore sound. You know, I had 2 other guys in there, and it was a symphony of snore, snore, and then me sitting there staring at the ceiling with my bulgy eyes like, is this really happening right now? Not only am I withdrawing, but I am experiencing a symphony of snores. But as soon as I took the trazodone, I would conquer it out. And that's really what I needed. My body needed sleep more than anything. So thank God for that medication, because as much as I didn't like the drowsy feeling the next day, it really helped me sleep through the night. Every morning, the guidance counselor would do his checkup on us as well when my vitals were being taken, and they would sit me down and they would say, so Nate, what is your plan after detox? And I would say, well, my plan is going to be just to jump back on the bandwagon. I'm going to go get a job, and I'm going to get my life back together. And they'd sit there, and they would just kind of shake their head and be like, Nate, you don't understand. The success rate of that is slim to none. I really recommend that you consider doing a rehab program. Have you thought about that? I said, no, not at all, actually. I don't want to go to rehab. I have a son. I have a life to live. And they said, well, what is your quality of life right now? How good of a father are you able to be when you're strung out on drugs? And how many times have you gone through this experience to say that you're confident that this is going to be a successful time where you're going to never use heroin again? And so I thought to myself, and they said, you know what? Before you make any decisions, I'm going to follow up with you tomorrow. We're going to give you some time to think about it. Okay, you're not ready to leave quite yet, so let's give you some time to think about it. So the next day comes, and I remember sitting there and thinking, really, what is my plan with this experience? Am I going to go to rehab afterwards? I've never even considered going to rehab. So they sat me down and they said, if you could go anywhere, Nathan, anywhere in the US, where would it be? You could go to Florida. And I said, I don't want to go to Florida. You could go to California. I said, I don't want to go to California either. They said, okay, well, if you could go anywhere in the US, where would you go for rehab? And I sat there and I thought, and something told me Hawaii. I had friends who'd been to Hawaii and they changed their lives. They went to the Big Island. So I thought, well, shoot, why not Hawaii? When I mentioned Hawaii, I think they kind of got the impression that I was trying to take a vacation. And so they reminded me, Nathan, you know, this is rehab we're talking about. Why is it you're choosing Hawaii? And I said, you know, to be honest, I'm not sure. It's just like my heart is telling me that's where I need to go. So they said, okay, well, if that's where you want to go and that's going to get you into rehab, let me make some phone calls and we'll see if we can get you into a program over there. So they made the phone calls. They pulled me back into the office. They told me, Nathan, we've got word back from the Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Center, and they're willing to take you in. Being that you've gone through the detox program over here, we can offer you a referral, and that will allow you a ticket into the program. All you need to figure out is how you're going to get there. So when my mom called that day to check up on me, I let her know, hey, there is an option for me to go to a program called the Salvation Army, and that's something I want to consider. My mom said, why Hawaii? And I gave her the same answer. You know, I feel like something is telling me that I need to go to Hawaii. And she said, you know what? If you're going to go to rehab, I will pay for you to go anywhere. So we had the ticket figured out. We had the rehab center figured out. Now it was just me riding out the last day at detox. I remember we got the opportunity to watch a movie before I left, and I picked 50 First Dates because I wanted to kind of get the feel for Hawaii, see what I was really getting myself into. It's funny because Hawaii is nothing like that movie. There's parts of the island that are like 50 First Dates because, yes, it is filmed out here, but it is so much more developed than the mainland gives you the impression of. So the day 6 came along. I was lined up to go out. They said they recommend me stay one more day. I said, no, I'm ready to get the hell out of this place. It's a mental institution here. I love everybody, great experiences, but I'm just ready to move on. So when it came down to it, I got picked up. My mom picked me up day 7 and took me home for one last night. I got to see my son, which was great. I felt like shit, but that's okay. So I had my son. We went to my mom's house, spent some time together, played in the yard, just some, you know, basic stuff. I still was feeling like crud. You know, I was sober, but I was weak. I was skinny. I was, you know, completely fatigued and out of my mind. So, you know, rehab was a good choice. But I spent the time I could with my son, enjoyed what I could of it. I didn't know when I was going to see him again. And I think that's one of the things that I totally underestimated with leaving, was the fact that I was leaving my, at the time, 4-year-old son and didn't know when I was coming back. I don't even know how much I really slept that night. But it was more just because I was full of adrenaline and excitement that I was going to be flying to Hawaii the next day. My mom picks me up around 3 a.m. My friend was there to see me off, him and his wife, and they wished me good luck. And, you know, we gave our hugs and said our goodbyes. And in the car I went. I remember having 2 shirts on, and I was so skinny you could see my bones through 2 layers of shirts. But in my mind, I probably thought I looked like $1 million. You know, I was sober for once in God knows how long. I ended up flying out to Hawaii. That's where I'm at to this day. The rehab story is a totally different story. Now, I guess the whole reason I'm making this video is I want to bring awareness to the seriousness of heroin addiction. It's not to be underestimated. I thought it would be all fun and games. I could jump off, jump on whenever I wanted to. And sure, of course, the first couple of times, that's something you can do. But when it comes down to you using for even a few days straight, you're hooked. And once you're hooked, it's like hell getting off of. I came into that program feeling completely helpless. I had no idea what to do, what to expect, or even what the outcome was going to be. I had hopes, but when it came down to it, it was just all faith-based, you know, because I had thought I literally rewired my brain and I was never going to be the same again. You know, as hopeless as you feel, even hearing somebody tell you it's going to be okay, you don't feel like. You feel like you're the exception to that rule, and it's going to just turn out horrifically. You're never gonna, it's not worth going through the week of hell, because afterwards you're just gonna relapse and become the same person you were prior, and it was just wasted energy, time, and suffering. So I guess I want to make this video to bring awareness to the fact that people are suffering out there, and if you want help, there are places to get that help. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are, there's got to be a detox center near you. You just got to ride through it. It is literally about, at the most, I say physical symptoms last about a week long. After that, it's all mental from then on forward. I don't know what you have going on in your life, but it doesn't mean that you can't fix it. With enough time, enough energy, anything is possible. Do not lose hope in yourself. I'm telling you, life is better, at least sober off of heroin. I mean, if you want to continue to use, that's your own agenda, but I'm telling you, meth and heroin, there's no light at the end of the tunnel for those 2 drugs. I've been there, I've done that, and my life has been 1,000 times better now that I've made that choice to change my life. I mean, here I am now living in Hawaii. It's a whole nother story, but I want you guys to understand that the opportunities, the possibilities, it is endless if you just make the change. Make the change, give it your all, and push yourself out of your comfort zone, kind of like you did while you were using drugs. Push yourself out of your comfort zone and invest as much time and energy into your recovery as you did your addiction. Now, if you guys like what you saw and you want to see more or hear more of my story, I'm totally open to sharing it. Hit the subscribe, hit the like, and we'll continue on this journey together. Peace.